Hey, paramedic students, watch this video on how to be a successful student.
Yeah, hopefully this records. How much work did it take for you, like in year one, how much work did you put in, say, every day's studying? Like, was it a significant amount of time every day to be successful, or?
Um, yes, in like bursts of time. So like weekends, obviously, I spent a lot of time at the library.
Oh,
But you could probably average it out to probably like a couple hours at least every day. I had like a background in science, so as far as like anatomy and physiology, it didn't take me as long to kind of get the grasp on that because I had sort of done it before in my undergrad.
right.
But it was certainly quite a bit because I didn't focus on human physiology before, so that was kind of new, but some of the concepts were familiar to me. But yeah, it certainly does take a lot of time to make sure you understand everything.
No, for sure. And the reason I'm asking is I'm just trying to help current students or future students understand the amount of work it takes to be successful, right?
Yeah.
So they have like a concept of, okay, this is the amount of time I need to spend every day throughout the semester. So you're like at least 2 hours per night on average, and then you'd spend extra time on things you were less familiar with.
Yeah, so I would spend a lot of time trying to understand concepts and like a larger picture. And I felt like obviously I worked really hard in year two as well, but because I put in so much time my first year, when you were like more specific in what you were learning in year two, because I had those main concepts down and like the anatomy down, it was a lot easier to learn the new stuff, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it came a lot easier to me in year two. Like I felt like I understood things quicker because I had a good base from year one.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've heard that from other people, is that if you put the work in year one, the year two is a lot smoother of a process. And
Yeah.
that makes sense in all across all programs, is putting the work in initially, realizing that this is dedicated time. This is challenging. How did you find, like, how much time for lab practice and stuff did you have to put in?
Um, Me and a couple other students in my class would meet usually like once a week together and kind of run through things together. And then I would usually, before each lab, spend about an hour kind of going through some things.
Okay, right, makes sense. Did you find your second year lab experience a little better with the changes, like no rotations, less case study work, more practice that way with like more video resources and stuff? Did you find that a little better than lab one?
Yeah, I felt like we weren't kind of rushed for time. In year one, if you didn't get done at a station, you kind of just had to move on anyway. And we had a pretty thorough group, so sometimes we ran long. But then in the second year, obviously you didn't have to move around, so there wasn't one instance where we didn't have enough time to finish everything.
What was it like to get ready for your clinical and practicum, all the paperwork and requirements? Like, any advice for future students on making that easier? Like, it's a long paper trail from what I understand.
For like PCRs or CCRs, that sort of thing, or
Not so much just being eligible to go out on your clinical time or your practicum time, like getting your immunization forms completed, like all the stuff you had to do for Mel, all your submissions. Was that a big ask? Like, there seems to be
a lot of it was we had done it before entry into the program, like immunizations and all those things were already done. So really it was just like the criminal record check, which you have to get frequently, so that's not really a big deal because you're pretty used to doing it because you do it every few months. I don't really think, like, I think we knew well in advance what we needed, and a lot of it we had already submitted before the program start. So I don't really think that it was unmanageable at all.
okay. for the most part, you're able to get to the locations you wanted to get to for your practicum experiences? Like the choices that you made, for the most part, seem to go fairly well, or?
Yeah, we didn't do obviously our first year one, but I got like near home, which would have been great. And then here I was happy to be in Nova Scotia because I was interested in working here as well. And it's melded really, like there's only I think 4 of us here, but we're all like close to the city, and everybody seemed really happy with where they got.
Okay, good. Any advice for the students on how to approach like their clinical shifts, like interactions with staff? We're trying to make the most out of that experience to get involved.
Yes. Okay, so clinical is really awkward because obviously we're paramedics, so pre-hospital kind of healthcare in a hospital environment, working with nurses or RTs, so it's not exactly people in your profession, and they don't always understand what you need or what you're trying to get out of that day. But if you just approach it like you're really excited to be there and you help them do like whatever they want, and just ask a lot of questions, and just you kind of feel sort of annoying because I would just like some nurses obviously, like I think they probably felt awkward as well because they just didn't know what to do with you. But if you're constantly like, hey, can I help you do this? Do you want me to do this for you? And it worked out a lot better. Like you're with them for 8 to 12 hours. So if at the beginning you're like, hey, can I clean that room for you? Then by the end of it, they're like, hey, maybe you can help me give this IV or whatever. And they're a lot more eager to kind of help you learn if you kind of show how eager you are and how helpful you can be. And like the OR shift, like a lot of students were complaining that they weren't getting in the room, but how it kind of went down was the lady kind of brought you inside the sterile part of the suite, like in the center. I'm not even sure what it's called, but and she sat you down and said, just stay here and they'll come get you. Well, in my mind, I'm like, okay, an anesthesiologist is not going to think to come and get me, a student who they probably don't even know that I'm here. So I just like looked on their schedule about what surgeries there were that day, and then literally stood outside the OR door and on the time that they were going in, and I figured out who obviously all the anesthesiologists were. And right before they entered the room, I was like, hi, my name is Marley. I'm a paramedic student. Can I come in with you today? And they were always like, oh, yeah, sure. I didn't even know you're here. Come right in. But if I would have been sitting there, like that lady said, like I wouldn't have gone in probably once. So you kind of have to put yourself out there and be a little brave, because like they're busy. Like they're literally doing surgery all day. So it's just like if you kind of approach them and you're friendly and you're right there where you need to be, like you won't have a problem, I don't think, getting in at all.
Yeah, so you're kind of working on communication skills, developing relationships slowly in the beginning. Like don't be absolutely too eager because you might rub people the wrong way.
And they kind of like, I found like nurses and staff would like say, oh, well, the last person was here, like didn't do that. And I'd be like, well, like I don't mind doing it. So like whatever you need, I'll do it. So they kind of like go with how you're acting. Like if you're just not really that engaged and you're just standing there and you're being super shy, then they're not going to ask you to do stuff because you are looking awkward. So if you're just doing like medial tasks, like even cleaning a room for them or like going to get them stuff, like they'll see that you want to do things and they'll be more active in helping you learn.
No, I think that's important. I agree. Yeah, it is. Some people will tend to be shy, but I had to push myself. I remember quite clearly. Just have to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone, and people will help you, right?
Yeah, it's really awkward, and I hate doing that. Like, hi, can I help you do this? Can I follow you do this? Can I watch you do this? And I always felt so annoying, but they were always really good, and it was fine. And
then that's only initially. Once they get to know you after a few shifts, then it's not nearly as awkward.
No, not at all. Like the second ER shift that I had, like they were like 100% better because they were like, oh, I remember you from last time. Do you want to come and do this with me? And I'm like, heck yes.
Yeah. Get to know their names, be polite, be nice.
Yeah.
What about your what about your practicum experience now? Any advice on going to shifts, getting involved, showing up early, being part of the
Yeah.
team?
I would definitely always show up early, and I usually I'm there before my preceptors, and I'm like doing the truck check. And one, it just shows, I think, like your initiative, but also like I'm just trying to like memorize like where everything is in the truck, and it's been really helpful. Like I go through it every single shift, so now I have a really good idea about where everything is, and like it just shows like that you're willing to do that sort of work. And I don't know, just kind of don't be shy. Like they're there to help you, but also they're not your cheerleaders. Like it's your time to make mistakes. So don't be so nervous to do anything that you just sit there and do nothing, I guess. But yeah, they're there to watch you learn, but also not there to kind of like pry it out of you. So kind of you have to be a little bit brave and a little bit confident and understanding you will make mistakes, but kind of just have to go for it anyway.
No, gotcha. So would all that lab practice you do benefit you for that? Like just building up the confidence, like getting out there, doing as much practice scenarios and
Yeah. Like when we had our first like real cardiac chest pain call and I was going through like the assessment in the way that we learned it, they were like really super impressed. Just like the amount of questions that I asked the patient and that I understood like that it was a cardiac, and I dug into like his symptoms, and they were like, that was really awesome. But I definitely could not have done it in real life, like under that pressure, if I hadn't have practiced it like 1,000 times.
yeah. Oh, I hear you. Even myself, like, because I work rarely, like once or twice a month, I find I have to just remember the steps. Like,
Yeah.
get out a piece of paper, just start asking the questions, breathe,
Yeah.
and get a sample of PQRST, do your physical exam, and by the end of it, very little is left out.
I also found that like my preceptor, they've been doing this job for so long, and obviously we've learned a very regimented way to do assessments that is applicable for literally any situation across the board. But they weren't doing that. Obviously, like on my first day when I showed up, they kind of had their own way of doing things, and I think like at first I was just confused and I was kind of disheartened because I was like, well, holy frig, like I don't know, like I can't do that. So I think the best thing is once I realized like they can do it their way and I'm going to do it the way that I know how to do it, then I've been like a lot more successful and I've been a lot more confident. And they're like, I think it's great that you do it that way, and like don't feel pressured that you're not doing it the way we are. Like the way you're doing it is right and it's fine. So it kind of threw me off a little bit, like my first day, because I'm like, well, this isn't like we learned in lab at all, and I was just confused and whatever. But you just kind of have to get over it and do it the way you learned, and you'll be a lot better off.
I think that's something good that we could tell people as faculty is this is something we're teaching you, but you're gonna get your own style of assessments based on your experiences with these preceptors. And I totally get it. Like it's always in my mind, the realities of the job is, as a student, is different from what you practice sometimes.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Now, hopefully we don't see too many bad habits out there, because there's going to be a few, but there's also going to be interesting ways of doing things that I've never experienced before done in my set. So
I also think that they have so much experience that they can target in really quickly because they can see straight away what's going on. Whereas like for me, and I'm still learning, like it would have taken me a lot longer to come to the conclusions that they got to so fast. So they're doing a very specific assessment right off the gate. They recognize it, but obviously like that takes a lot of time and practice and knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much for telling me. And everyone else that joined, I was just asking Marley some questions based on Paramedic program, how to be as successful as possible, get you to graduation and get you competent as a paramedic. So thank you so much. I will stop recording right now. Thank you, Marley.
No problem.